Awesome. Yeah.
Welcome to the Sleep Experience podcast, where we take a deep dive into the latest sleep hacks, gadgets, and strategies to skyrocket your productivity to new heights. Being a high performer is all about resting at 100%, so you can execute at 100%.
Contracts and medication, they weren't doing anything for me, so I felt like my back was up against the wall.
Hey, this is Riley, host of the Sleep for Side Hustlers podcast. At Sleep for Side Hustlers, we interview holistic sleep experts and teach our community how upgrading their sleep is the one thing that they need to unlock their biological code and maximize their performance in an effortless way by doing more with less. Do you want to become a productivity machine, have genius ideas automatically pop into your mind, stop feeling so stressed, build better relationships, and generate more income? Optimizing your deep sleep can do just that. Visit www.thesleepconsultant.com to learn more. My guest today is Dr. Andrew Hill. Andrew is the founder of Peak Brain, a clinic that helps people overcome cognitive challenges and reach their peak performance goals with quantitative EEG brain mapping, neurofeedback training, heart rate variability, biofeedback, and mindfulness meditation. The result is improved focus, attention, creativity, mood, sleep, stress, traumatic stress recovery, and more. Holding a PhD in cognitive neuroscience and practicing neurofeedback for the last 20 years, a guest on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast, a guest of his own, a host of his own podcast called Head First. Andrew is a veteran of the neurofeedback field, helping people around the world transform their brain. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Riley. It's nice to be here. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to speak with like-minded people who are obsessed with the brain as much as I am, because I know the people around me think and know that I talk about it just too much. So I really just want to dive into you, keeping it open. What fascinates you about the brain and pushing it to its limits?
I mean, the fact that it can be pushed to its limits, certainly is a starting place for a lot of that. The fact that this is something that we see both in the neurofeedback space, and we also tend to see in any area of human change, that gets attention, be that healing or education or athletic performance and skill acquisition. Plasticity or change or development is very, very noticeable and tends to, for obvious reasons, change our lives. And so when, you were joking that people may accuse you for talking about the brain too much.
Yeah.
Well, it's all in your head, right? Like everything you experience is coming through that lens, that filter, interpreted that way. So that seems like a good place to start when you're trying to make large amounts of change. And, I got excited about getting into it when I saw what was possible, basically.
Yeah, that's amazing. And and then fast forward till today. I mean, I'm sure you've seen so many transformations of people of all kinds of ages, from children to adults to peak performance to people in debilitating actual medical conditions. Just for our audience, what do you currently do now? I said it briefly, but what do you do? Who do you help? And what are some of your favorite transformations that you've seen in your clients?
Sure. So at this point, Peak Brain, which is my company, helps people regardless of what the particular goal set is, as long as they have some. So about a third of our clients have goals that are more peak performance and high level flow, athletic performance, high performance under stress, executive performance.
Yeah.
About a third is the more classic neurofeedback population. People with ADHD, autistic spectrum features, sleep issues, stress, trauma, PTSD, migraines, concussions. These days we get a lot of post-COVID as well, I would say, that post-COVID brain fog in that same bucket of a neuro, let's say. So there's the peak performance bucket and the neurological need bucket. And the third bucket is probably all the rest of us who are burnt out and stressed and might drink a little bit too much every so often and have some trauma history and some wear and tear, but none of these things might rise the level of diagnostic label, but they become things that are, valid to work on and to take control over and to learn about. So we work as enthusiastically with a kid who's screaming and flapping his hands and having seizures as we do with a 55-year-old CEO who can't downshift at 7:30 at night and is still a jerk to his kids. Like it's as long as you have goals and you can describe them, then our job, our process with folks is to sort of dive in and show them what their brain looks like, show them what their performance looks like. And instead of sort of doing this diagnostic relationship where, here's a label, here's what's wrong, we say, here's data, let's work together and model it and think about what could be going on, teach you to think about your brain waves, your brain regions, your performance testing. And out of that almost always emerges someone's perspective of stuff they already know. So we're sort of modeling, we're creating ideas about
Yeah.
what is plausible in the brain maps, what is likely in the performance testing.
Yeah.
And
really,
out of that, people know,
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's, people sort of always have that hunch, but sometimes the numbers never lie, but it kind of gives people, I'm sure when they see the mapping for the first time, you kind of like, do you ever feel yourself like this in this situation, that in that situation? They're like, yeah, how did you know? Because it's
yeah, all the time, every day,
yeah.
10 times a day. I joke I'm kind of like your tailor or your priest or your imam. I have the tape measure out and I'm like, your waistline is what? Really?
Yeah.
And people have the experience when I'm describing things in the brain maps, because I do this sort of cold hypothesis generation process where I say, this part of the brain, these brain waves are unusual. And, first I say things like, good job, be weird. We don't care about the fact that it's unusual on its own, but here's some ideas about how that can operate.
Yeah.
And we find a region and we say, here's some plausible points of suffering or a bottleneck or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's often true, because the stuff that I tend to model is the stuff that is most valid in the data.
Yeah.
And I, day in, day out, get comments like, oh my God, you can see that? I had no idea you can see that phenomena. I experience all the time, be it brain fog or executive function stuff or rumination or sleep dysregulation. When sleep gets thrown off, there's a few characteristic phenomena. I was thinking earlier today about this podcast, and I was like, oh, sleep's a big topic in neurofeedback and brain mapping and everything else. And there's like 4 or 5 different really interesting overlaps with regards to sleep. Now, of course, classic neurofeedback was discovered because of manipulating a brainwave that maintains sleep, called sleep spindles, or SMR. 12 to 15 hertz when you're awake keeps you able to sit still and not go squirrel and not have seizures. The cat on the windowsill watching birds with a still body and laser-like focus is literally the opposite of ADHD.
Wow.
But if you can't make that SMR state, you also can't initiate or sustain sleep very well. And there's other phenomena. If it's very, very poor, especially focally, you get seizure activity sometimes. So SMR as a core sleep architecture, core regulatory feature of the brain, helps regulate sleep. But then we also think about things like the alpha theta states, the creativity and flow state stuff. And that's a hypnagogic state training. You bring people to the edge of sleep, where there's a crossover and there's a dropping away of the monkey mind and an insight and a bubbling up and an opening. That moment as you fall asleep and you solve world hunger or write your next book or solve that business problem, and then you wake up in the morning and you think, oh, wait a minute, I had a good idea last night. So you can train someone's brain, you can bring them to that edge for 20, 25 minutes at a time.
Wow.
Which is a lot of time potentially to spend in that liminal state of ideas and receptive attention and things bubbling up. So you can use these techniques in neurofeedback that are promoting aspects of sleep, but not in a sleep context.
Yeah. That's amazing. And then the application of that is they actually come sit down, play games with electrodes connected to their brain based on what the brain mapping is, and slowly train their brain, right?
Neurofeedback, the technique is largely across the field. Most of the techniques are passive, meaning they don't zap the brain, which is what we do basic, classic, tailored neurofeedback. But generally you would stick a wire or two to the head and measure someone's brain in real time. And as the brain happens to shift itself in the right direction. So SMR, this frequency I touched on, is involved with executive function, sleep architecture, seizure suppression, self-control. It's a good thing to train up in a lot of people, which is one of the reasons we spent some time focusing on it as one of our core manipulations. But the way you would often train that up initially is in the right-hand side of the brain, somewhere between the crown and the right ear. There's a circuit involved with some sleep architecture stuff, but a lot of things involved with supervisory attention, knowing if you're paying attention or not. And it does its job with this low beta frequency we call SMR. It's 12 to 15 hertz beta. And it doesn't do its job. It releases its behavior to be a little more automatic with a brainwave called theta, about 4 to 7 hertz. So theta is like lubrication in the brain. You need it. If you don't have a lot of theta, you can't move your brain around, your thoughts around. You can't activate stuff or switch stuff out of the gear it's in. But if you have too much of it, especially in those circuits on top of the head, the brain is like squirrel. Can't pump the brakes on anything. So you often want to train that SMR up on the right side for sleep and executive function overlap, essentially, the maintenance of sleep. Dr. Martin Arns wrote a really great paper about 10 years ago, ARNS, and he's out of Utrecht. And he wrote a great paper about 10 years ago showing the similarity in the literature between sleep spindle stabilization difficulty and ADHD in the brain. So this basically positing the idea that ADHD is a sleep disorder, essentially, or an architecture of sleep, a parasomnia or something. Anyways, to train the brain, as an aside, to train the brain, you stick the wire there on the right-hand side and measure your SMR, measure your theta, and the brain happened to briefly move in that right direction. You just applaud it with some auditory or visual feedback or both. And when it moves in the wrong direction, quote unquote, you would withhold the applause. And the brain goes, "Oh, hey, wait, why is my theta dropping? Doing stuff. I like stuff. Stuff's cool. Wait, where's my stuff? Oh, there's my stuff." And the computer's going, "Good job, good job, good job. Nope. Good job, good job. Nope." And then the big trick here is we move the goalposts. So this is shaping or operant conditioning. You can think Skinner's pigeon's not Pavlov's dog. And we end up sort of gradually producing an effect. And it's a very transient. You've experienced it. You've experienced it rapidly and quickly, you were saying, but you didn't experience a dramatic permanent change right away. It was like an inflection, like a hard workout. Whoa, I felt that. What the heck? Huh. And then it wanes and wears off later that day, the next day. And you're like, interesting. So we use that a lot. We have our clients fill out sleep surveys every morning and they check in on their day surveys every day. We have a live chat going all the time with each client. So we're kind of helping be like personal trainers for your brain. And that can be, to answer your first question, towards someone with very great difficulty or with a lot of performance goals. So we're a partner in that for people generally. So
no kidding. And I would imagine people see effects pretty short, pretty fast overall. Like someone first comes to see you, they get their brain mapped. Let's say they're doing a couple sessions a week. How fast until they see the results they usually want?
Yeah, we recommend 3 times a week, and they're about half-an-hour sessions. And somewhere around session 3, 4, 5, someone's like, "Hey, wait a minute, I think I'm feeling something." And about half the time it's nah, and the next time they're like, no, actually yes. And then maybe 1 person out of 10 gets a month in, is like, "I don't feel anything." But their sleep has changed, or their stress has changed, or their tolerance to cannabis or Adderall has gone away. So, not everyone's really good at noticing the internal currents. I find that people with a lot of anguish and trauma, people with a lot of brain fog, people who are deeply creative, meditators, those people are aware of the shift of currents like this. You break the brain fog up even a little bit. It's like a Disney movie, and a sunbeam hits you and birds land on your shoulders and you rush back in going, "Oh my God, I was seeing better." You were probably attending better. No, I was seeing better. The world was bright and clear, and that's great. Let's do some more of that, So it's a journey where we don't know what's happening always, but we're trying to elicit an effect, gently bring it up, and then iterate. And it becomes more permanent as you hit 20, 30, 40 sessions. You start getting a stabilization. And your brain is practicing that mode. It's doing most of what we do. A lot of what we do in neurofeedback is working on resources. And those resources are always there and often being used. So sleep, stress, and attention are often manipulated, or speed of processing, often manipulated. And you're using that all the time. You get far enough with a new resource change, and the practice is really why it's permanent, or stable at least. Because your brain it likes to be in a mode, likes to use the resources it has, so it stays pretty stable. So
that's once they go through that 20, 30, 40 sessions, after that, they're kind of in maintenance mode. And then you probably only need those tune-up sessions once every year, things like that.
I often don't do tune-up sessions. I would say only half the time do folks come back. And the half time they come back, we have a couple of different relationships with clients and their data and their brains than is typical. We have several offices in the US plus a couple overseas. And in our physical offices, if folks are nearby, they get a membership and they have free mapping of their brain throughout the year.
Amazing.
And so all your podcast listeners, if they're near LA or St. Louis or New York City or Orange County, it's $250 a year for a membership, unlimited maps, a couple of consults in education. It's a tool to use to understand your med changes, concussions, COVID, whatever. And then the neurofeedback's on top of that, essentially in our packages. And people do that for a few months. So most of our clients do 3 months to begin, either in the office or from home. And they generally get done 40 sessions or more in that time frame. And we map the brain every 20 or 25 again, and you can usually make a visible change in the data of the brain maps and the performance testing that matches the person's experience pretty well as it builds up. at about the magnitude of about 1 standard deviation in the data every 20 or 25 sessions. So someone comes in with major brain fog or major ADHD or a big cluster of, trauma, threat sensitivity activated in the back of their head, and it's a couple standard deviations out of range. You don't know where they want to be, what'll feel good necessarily, or even if it's valid, maybe a lifeguard, not someone with trauma. But you know that if you work on it and you get some subjective effect and you keep going, that's going to move to that degree roughly. So it's very mysterious what we do, but it's not especially blind, because you're experiencing stuff and you're like, hey, wait a minute. Coaches, I noticed this. So we double down on that instead of doing therapy like most people do and keeping that container, that transference thing going so we can be deeply aware of how your nuances are shifting. We thrust the agency back upon you like you're an athlete and have you log a lot and check in a lot and do your own work. And, So once people have done 40 sessions or more, which is 3 months, if it's something like ADHD or a sleep issue or some trauma, they're usually fairly stable. If it's concussions, if it is a lot of goals, if it's developmental, autistic spectrum stuff, it's usually 6 months before they're really leveling out and stable. And there's clients of mine, I've had both people with great needs and those with sort of great goals, more peak performance ones, who have trained for hundreds and hundreds of sessions for years and years and years. A couple of those are just like people who aren't going to ever leave any possibility off the table. So they're squeezing the resource, those peak performers. And a couple are like people I met in their, early teens or earlier with a lot of difficulties as they moved into adolescence. And now they're in college or beyond, and they've like soared. And I've been part of that journey with them. I met them with difficult language or seizures or social difficulties. And now they're teaching college, or now they're performing in front of, concert halls, and now they're writing papers. So the relationship they have with their brain is different. And Peak Brain as a company often becomes this resource for people to help them demystify their brain. So we started doing it in that mode, and it became very powerful as an educational thing beyond the sort of even just the change you get. Sometimes seeing your brain can, the scales fall away and you go, oh yeah, that habit I have of eating sugar at 10 p.m. every night, it is screwing my deep sleep. Oh my God, look at that. I can see it. Oh, that's how bad it is. Oh, okay. Yeah. Let me back off it on the carbs after 6 p.m. or whatever, So it develops agency instead of concern. And part of that is if you see something in a brain map that's a real difficulty for you, since you see it, you can usually go after it and change it. It's not hard to change brain data. It's just hard to understand it, so to speak. So as you narrow in on what matters to you, it becomes really progressively more enjoyable to train your brain, basically.
No kidding. And I'm sure that it's a pretty good positive addiction for a lot of people too, especially when they feel it in real time.
I don't know what the metaphor is. Those gym bros that like can't put their arms down because it's really easy to develop a giant upper body for some guys, like there's a certain, I have certain segments of clients who are like, what are you kidding? I'm never stopping this. I get the zone. I get to use this when I'm ill. I get to use it when I'm stressed.
Why stop?
Why stop? And that alludes to the idea that you can get state shifts, not just a trait or resource change from neurofeedback. I'm really often working on resource changes, but some people really do enjoy the acute state shifts, especially when you're doing like creativity work or, you can do access, or you can get juicy or loose in your resources and send yourself off to therapy to work with your therapist to like, help pry stuff or help you process stuff properly. So it's just another tool, like you might, have your meditation or your yoga or your sleep tracker or your bed chiller or your whatever it is you use to hack your environment or hack yourself,
Amazing. Yeah. I think that's incredible. I work with a lot of people who are on the high performance. I'm probably similar to who you work with, functional medicine testing, looking at genetics, looking at hormones, but this is just one thing with the brain, because our thoughts create a chemical reaction inside of our body. And so we can be in an either anabolic response, a catabolic response, and everything that goes along with it. So I think what anyone who's really considering it should really jump on the bandwagon for sure. What about for people who just want more at-home devices? Maybe they're not close to a center. Is there any gadgets, tools, softwares that you suggest people might be able to use in their house?
Yeah. There are some biofeedback devices. I mean, you alluded to controlling the mode you're in. You can get great HRV biofeedback devices to balance yourself between the sympathetic and parasympathetic, train the vagus nerve.
Yeah.
What happens in the vagus doesn't stay in the vagus. So you can train the HRV and get this flexible control over your stress response. You can lean out of sympathetic and back into parasympathetic. But in terms of neurofeedback, we do our programs at home with you with the same hardware and software and send it to you and do live supervision and do live brain mapping in your living room. Yeah. So if you want to map your brain on your caffeine and without, your Adderall and without, the comfort of your own home, we'll send you a little amplifier and teach you how to do it. And,
wow. The whole shebang.
Yeah. And our clients have a live support system for during the time. So we teach them how to do the basics, but then as they set themselves up, they stick wires on, take a photograph and say, coaches, and we like, oh, that looks great. Or, why don't you move the left one over, about a half centimeter. And the coach is always there 7 days a week to sort of support. So the metaphor here is like being at the high-end gym with your workout pad in front of you, looking confused in front of a complicated machine. And a coach runs over and says, let me see. Oh yeah, one of these, cool. Here's how you set this one up. Here's the seat height lever. Here's the, and because the software's a little finicky and a little complicated, but it's not hard to do the techniques of neurofeedback. Yeah. It's hard to know what to do next or how to progress, how to chase a goal, how to adjust for an effect you get. Yeah. But we can teach you to stick ear clips on, find a couple spots in your head, check for 50 or 60 hertz noise in the signal, log what you're doing, track your sleep, ask for help. And so our coaches jump on your private chat every couple of days and say, hey, haven't seen a sleep survey in a few days, or, hey, thanks for filling out your day survey. Good job. Wow, you were super focused. I think we're on track. And then I help guide that progressive workout planning every few days, so.
Amazing. Love it all, Andrew. Last question I have for you here.
Sure.
In terms of, a lot of these peak performers, they're entrepreneurs, they're high-level CEOs, things like this. Have you seen direct, tangible benefits in their brain performance with how much they're making in their business as a leader with, they're managing hundreds of employees potentially, things like that?
Yeah, I would say there's two probably really interesting, almost like categories there. Yeah. One of them is the person that's become successful, but at the cost of regulatory resilience. Got it. And the other is the person for whom the failure of regulatory resilience is getting in the way of them being successful. Got it. And I've had folks come to me just after getting funding when everything has fallen apart. Yeah. And I've had folks come to me when they have conquered the world financially. Yeah. But not in any other way. And they've really shorted it in a bunch of other ways. And in both cases, we make magical transformations. Generally, we take the person who's 50-year-old, highly successful CEO, who's kind of anxious and kind of burnt out and can't talk to his wife. Mm-hmm. And 6 months later, we've made dramatic changes in anxiety, executive function, sleep quality. Yeah. We get calls from his wife thanking us for whatever we did yesterday because they had the best conversation ever. Alpha theta neurofeedback for active consciousness, and we get calls the next day. Wow. Or from the therapist. Oh, keep working my client that way. That's a great session because you get access. You can make yourself kind of juicy. Right. So for the folks that are on that brittle, successful but brittle side, that's one of the failover places that happens with success. Yeah. The other one is as the stress of architecting your success builds up, there's pinches, and you find your perseveration, your threat sensitivity, your obsession, your sleep dysregulation, your ADHD. Yeah. And I work with those people all the time because people that are trying to move to that arc of small to large business or launching their first product. Yeah. And often I do get them right after they have had a tiny bit of success because that's when the pinches start becoming most visible for some people in that, high performer landscape. And it's because the cost of not addressing the pinches is suddenly very, very like, oh, okay, this thing has to be dealt with right now. Yeah. And we can usually create change in, you feel it in a few sessions. And for things like executive function and stress and sleep and just getting your brain in shape, 3 months is a sufficient amount of time for most folks to create this arc. And you're getting really good support from a few weeks in terms of the new resources building up. So the time scale, entrepreneurs love that. They love like, all right, let me solve this. Yeah. Yeah. And so half of them solve it and then they move on. Another half of them like, what else you got, doc? And I get them meditating and I get them doing, a high protein, low carb diets and whatever else. those ones that are brittle and burnt out are often the ones that want more of whatever else I got. Yeah. And we get them meditating and they continue to do neurofeedback, that population, because they're like, all right, let's see what else we can get. This is interesting.
Yeah.
I've noticed a tendency for these middle-aged, mostly male, mostly burnt out CEOs who have a little hint of OCD or other anxiety when they first show up, get a great transformation in 3-4 months, 5 months, 6 months. And then they often back off a tiny bit on the neurofeedback, but continue a bunch of other stuff with us, including meditation.
Yeah.
And then they come back and say, hey, doc, I got to talk to you. About 6 months after they get into meditation seriously, they're a little bit like sheepishly trying to ask me a question they don't quite want to ask me.
Yeah.
And what's happening is they're experiencing events while meditating suddenly.
Oh,
absorption events, balls of light, warmth, feelings of shaking. These are called the jhanas. These are absorption events that happen usually when you've been meditating for 10 to 20 years in concentration practices classically. And they're getting them their first 6 months of meditation because neurofeedback's on board and meditation structure's on board, and the plasticity is so high that you're getting transformation continuously from some of these people.
That's
so
incredible.
Yes, to answer your question, but it's a little bit specific.
Right.
It's at least, in those two categories. So
got it. Love it. I feel like I could talk to you 2 hours about all this stuff. If people want to find more about you, they want to come to your clinics, learn more resources, where can they visit?
Yes, we have peakbraininstitute.com as the website, and all of our socials are Peak Brain LA because that was our first office. Yeah. And I'm at Andrew Hill, PhD on the socials, but that's mostly like baked goods and reverse seared steaks and things. It's not really that brain focused unless you like cooking. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on today, Andrew. That was all your socials? That was all my socials. Yeah. Awesome. Come check us out. Ask us your brain questions. We have some challenges going on right now for the end of the year. And all the podcast listeners can get discounts for brain mapping in the office or on a remote program sent to your home. So let us know if we can support you. Incredible. Okay, we'll put all that down below in the show notes. All right, guys, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you would like to learn more about how sleep can benefit your personal or business life, visit thesleepconsultant.com. Until next time. Thanks for listening to the Sleep Experience podcast. We'll see you next time on next week's episode. Be sure to subscribe and follow us to get future updates on everything sleep, energy, focus, stress, and better performance.